The hum of Epsilon Station filled the quiet dorm hallways, a steady, low sound that never truly went away. It was late in the evening, the kind of quiet hour when most students were either asleep or buried in their studies. Eli had just finished a long day of training and returned to his shared dorm room, shoulders aching, mind foggy, and uniform half undone. He was ready for a shower, a change of clothes, and a few hours of peace before the next cycle began. He had only been assigned his new roommate that morning, someone from the exchange program between human and alien cadets. The Interspecies Academy had mixed quarters now, a step toward unity through coexistence, as the brochure proudly declared. Eli didn't mind. He'd been raised among many kinds of people, from miners on Mars to traders on the moon colonies. But this was his first time actually living with someone from another species. He didn't even know what they looked like yet. He had only seen a name on the room roster, Lurathe Vera Australian. He had no idea what Australian meant. He'd planned to look it up after dinner, but exhaustion had won. Now half undressed and halfway through pulling off his shirt, he heard the faint sound of the door's access panel beep. He frowned. Wait, who's... Before he could finish, the door slid open with a soft hiss of pressurized air, and there she was. For a few seconds, Eli's brain completely froze. The figure standing in the doorway didn't look like anything he had imagined. She was tall, maybe a head taller than him, with skin that gleamed like soft silver under the light. Her large eyes glowed faintly, reflecting light like glassy pools of water, and delicate glowing lines ran down her neck and shoulders, pulsing gently like veins of light. She looked more like a painting than a person, graceful, fragile, and unreal. Laura froze too. The moment her gaze landed on Eli, her body stiffened, crest flaring wide. Her mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no sound came. For a heartbeat, the world just stopped. Then came the most awkward silence of Eli's life. He realized, with a jolt of horror, that he was standing there shirtless. Oh, for crying out loud, he muttered, fumbling for the nearest piece of cloth, his towel, and wrapping it around his shoulders. You could have knocked. Laura blinked rapidly, her crest, a thin fin running down the center of her head, flickering in bright shades of blue. I did not know your species required warning before entry. The dorm access said open. Well, yeah, he said, half laughing, half mortified. That doesn't mean you barge in. She tilted her head, still staring at him as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. You are uncovered, she finally said, voice soft and filled with both shock and fascination. Eli sighed. Yeah, I was changing. Humans do that sometimes. Her crest shimmered a deep violet and she took an involuntary step back. You expose your surface? Willingly? He blinked. Surface? Your skin. Her voice trembled. You have no plates. No scales, no shell. How are you? Alive? Eli couldn't help it. He burst out laughing. Well, that's humans for you. Soft, squishy, and somehow still kicking. Laura didn't laugh. Her glowing eyes were wide, almost horrified. You are vulnerable, she whispered. Completely unprotected. The way she said it wasn't insulting, it was almost... Said for a moment, Eli stopped laughing. He saw how her crest dimmed, the glow along her body fading to a pale gray. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was frightened. For her species, maybe skin wasn't just skin. Maybe it was sacred. Or shameful. Eli spoke softly this time. Hey, it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong, just next time give a little knock, all right? She nodded slowly, her voice quiet. I did not mean offense. I did not expect a human to be so exposed. Yeah, well, he said, pulling on his shirt, trying to lighten the mood again. Humans are full of surprises. Her crest flickered faintly, a color he couldn't name, and somewhere between confusion and curiosity. Then she said something he didn't expect. You show your weakness so easily, she murmured. And yet, you are not afraid? Eli looked at her, unsure how to respond. Guess that's just how we're built. She studied him one more time, this strange, fragile creature who stood uncovered yet unashamed. And something about that sight seemed to shake her deeply. Finally, she stepped back toward the doorway, bowing her head slightly. I will remember to knock, she said softly, then turned and left the room. As the door slid shut behind her, Eli let out a long breath and chuckled under his breath. Well, he muttered, that's one way to meet your roommate. But somewhere in the quiet hum of the dorm, he couldn't shake the image of her eyes, wide, glowing and filled with something he didn't expect. Not disgust, not fear, wonder. The next morning, Eli woke up to the faint sound of something humming. It wasn't the usual hum of Epsilon Station's engines. It was softer, more melodic, like a low song. He blinked his sleepy eyes open and found his new roommate sitting cross-legged near the window, her silver skin glimmering faintly in the dawn light. Lura The Vera, the Australian. She was reading from a small holographic screen, her crest glowing faintly blue as she whispered words in her native tongue. Eli lay still for a moment, quietly watching. There was a strange peace about her, like she carried silence around her wherever she went. When she noticed him stirring, the glow on her crest flickered suddenly. She lowered the hollow slate at once, as if caught doing something private. "Good morning," Eli said, voice still groggy. Lura hesitated before answering. "You rest loudly," she said in that calm, almost musical tone of hers. He laughed. "You mean snoring? Yeah, that's a human feature. Comes free with the breathing." She tilted her head slightly as if filing away this new fact about humans. Her expression stayed neutral, but her crest betrayed her emotions, pulsing faintly pink. Embarrassment, maybe curiosity. The silence stretched awkwardly between them until Eli decided to break it. "Hey, about last night," he said softly. "You don't have to feel weird about it. It happens, just different customs, right?" Lura turned toward him slowly. Her eyes, large and bright, seemed to study every detail of his face. "On Othrail," she said quietly, "to see another's bare surface is considered deeply personal. We only shed our plates during renewal. That time is sacred. To see another's body, then, it is like seeing their spirit." Eli nodded slowly, understanding a little more now. "So when you walked in on me, it was not just intrusion," she interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "It was disrespect. I shame myself before you." He sat up on the bed, shaking his head. No, don't think like that. You didn't do anything wrong. I should have locked the door. We both learned something new, right?" Lura blinked, taken aback by his easy tone. "You forgive easily," she murmured. He smiled. "Humans have to. We mess up a lot." Her crest flickered again, a soft purple hue this time. "Strange," she whispered, almost to herself. "Where I come from, forgiveness is earned, not given." Eli grinned. "Maybe that's why humans are still around. We forgive too fast to stay enemies for long." That made her fall silent again. But there was something new in her eyes. Not confusion, but thought. Like his words had unsettled something inside her. After a while, she changed the subject. "I researched your kind," she said. "Humans come from a world full of danger. Fires, storms, beasts. Yet you survived with no outer shell, no claws, no armor." "Yeah," Eli said, grabbing a ration bar from his pack. "We had to get creative. Tools, teamwork, hope, and a lot of stubbornness." "Got stubbornness?" He bit into the bar and grinned. "It means we don't quit. Even when everything goes wrong, we try again." Laura's crest shimmered a faint gold now, a sign of admiration. "So that is how the soft survive," she said quietly. "By refusing to stop," he chuckled. "Exactly. You're starting to get it." For the rest of the morning, they spoke about little things and food, sleep, training routines. Lura preferred cold environments. Eli preferred warmth. She drank mineral water that smelled faintly of metal. He drank coffee so strong it made her crest twitch in horror. Bit by bit, the awkwardness between them began to melt. But there were still moments, small ones, when she stared at him like she was studying something she couldn't quite explain. Once, when he laughed at a joke, she whispered under her breath, "You create joy from sound. How strange." And when he offered her a piece of chocolate later, she froze as if he'd handed her a weapon. "Why?" she asked softly. "You share food with no gain." "Why?" Eli just smiled. "Because it's nice." You looked like you needed a smile. She blinked, utterly lost. "But I did not request comfort." "You don't have to," he said gently. "Humans just do it. We help people we care about." Lura stared at the small square of chocolate in her hand as though it carried the answer to the entire human species. Slowly she took a bite. The expression that crossed her face, a mix of surprise, wonder, and delight, made Eli grin. Her crest glowed softly, turning golden again. "Sweet," she said. "It feels like sunlight inside." Eli laughed. "That's chocolate for you." First lesson in being human, never say no to it. And for the first time since she arrived, Laura smiled. It was small, hesitant, but it was real. And in that moment, Eli realized something. Maybe this wasn't just a cultural exchange anymore. Maybe this was the start of a friendship neither of them had expected. Weeks passed on Epsilon Station, and slowly, the strangeness of sharing a room with an alien started to fade. Eli and Laura fell into a rhythm. Quiet mornings, shared meals, and late-night talks when the stars outside glowed brighter than the lights inside. But living with someone from another world wasn't always easy. Not when both hearts beat to such different rhythms. Laura came from a people who valued silence and control. Her gestures were precise, her tone calm, and every word seemed chosen with purpose. For her, emotions were private storms, never to be shown. Eli, on the other hand, was human, full of warmth, laughter, and 100 ways to show how he felt. He talked with his hands, laughed too loud, and sometimes sang while cooking. One morning, when Eli burned his breakfast toast for the 3rd time, he laughed it off and tossed the ruined bread aside. Laura, however, just stared in disbelief. "You waste food," she said quietly, her crest dimming gray. Yeah," Eli said sheepishly. It was kind of blackened beyond saving. "On Othrail," she replied softly. "Food is sacred. Every grain is a gift. We do not discard what has been offered." Eli's smile faltered. He hadn't meant to offend her, but he could see it in her eyes. She truly believed he had done something wrong. He apologized, and she nodded stiffly. But that day she hardly spoke. It was a small misunderstanding, yet it left a heavy silence between them. A few nights later, Eli found her sitting near the window again, staring out at the stars. He sat beside her quietly, unsure if she wanted company. After a while, she spoke without turning. "You humans live with such noise inside you," she said softly. "Laughter, sorrow, anger, and all showing, all spilling. You live in chaos and call it emotion." Eli looked at her, a gentle smile on his lips. "Maybe, but we call it living." She turned to face him, her eyes catching the faint blue glow of the station lights. "On my world, showing such emotion is weakness. It invites harm. The strong remain calm. We do not cry. We do not shout," he nodded. "That's the thing about humans," he said. "We cry when it hurts and we laugh when it doesn't. We fall apart sometimes, and then we build ourselves back up again." Laura looked away, her crest flickering faintly. "And yet you survive," she whispered. "Despite being soft. Despite being so open. That's kind of our secret," he said gently. "We survive because we feel. We care for each other." Her eyes softened, though her tone stayed uncertain. "Strange creatures," she murmured. "You give away pieces of your heart so easily." "Where do you find so many?" Eli chuckled quietly. "We don't run out. The more we give, the more it grows." Laura fell silent, her glowing crest slowly fading into calm gold. She didn't fully understand, but something in his words lingered inside her. Their friendship deepened, though not without friction. Laura had her ways, structured, logical, efficient. Eli's habits drove her crazy. His messy bed, his habit of humming random tunes, his way of leaving coffee mugs on every surface. Once, she found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, fixing an old music player. "It is broken," she said. "Discard it." "Can't," Eli said with a grin. "It belonged to my mother. I'll make it work again," she frowned. "But why hold to the past? It has no purpose now." "Because some things don't need purpose," he said quietly. "They just remind us who we are." Laura stared at him for a long moment, trying to grasp the strange human sentiment. Finally, she whispered, "On Othrail, memories fade for a reason. We are not meant to look back." Eli smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why humans look up at the stars, because we always want to remember where we came from." That night, Laura wrote a small note in her datapad, part of a personal study on human behavior. Humans are illogical. They feel pain yet seek it again. They lose and still hope. They break and still smile. Their strength does not come from armor or power, but from something unseen. Perhaps from the heart. When Eli later found her dozing at the table, datapad still open, he read the last few lines and smiled softly. He didn't wake her. He just whispered, "You're starting to get us." Laura, her crest glowed faintly even in sleep, the color of quiet curiosity. Maybe. Eli thought she was learning more than any class could ever teach her. And maybe, without knowing it, she was teaching him too, about patience, respect, and how even across worlds, two souls could find a language of their own. Epsilon Station had seen quiet days before, but that morning was different. The hum of the corridors felt heavier, the air too still, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Eli and Laura were in the engineering wing for their maintenance training. It was routine, checking energy conduits, recalibrating plasma valves, making sure the pressure units were stable. Boring work, Eli thought, until it wasn't. Laura worked in silence beside him, her long fingers moving gracefully across the control panel. She was always so precise, so calm, like every movement had been practiced 1,000 times. Eli, meanwhile, hummed quietly as he worked, a tune he didn't even realize he was singing. "You make noise even during concentration," she said without looking up. "It helps me think," he replied with a grin. She gave a faint sigh. "Humans are strange," he chuckled. "You keep saying that, but you're still here." Before she could answer, a sudden warning tone echoed through the room. Sharp, shrill, urgent. The lights flickered. The air filled with the crackling sound of overloaded circuits. Eli's grin vanished as the console in front of him sparked violently. "Pressure spike in plasma line 4, Laura shouted, her voice breaking its usual calm. "It's overloading." Eli moved fast, checking the valves, trying to redirect the flow. But before he could, a pipe along the far wall glowed bright red, the metal trembling like it was alive. "Get back," he yelled. Laura hesitated, trying to reroute the system manually. "If I can release the pressure." "Laura, move!" The pipe burst. A cloud of blue-white plasma shot across the room, burning through metal and air alike. Eli didn't think, he just ran. He threw himself forward, grabbing Laura by the waist and pushing her to the ground behind a support beam. The blast hit his arm as he fell, and pain exploded through him like fire. He bit back a scream. The smell of scorched fabric and skin filled the air. When the alarms finally silenced and the emergency seals came down, Laura was trembling. She turned toward him, her eyes wide, crest flashing red and the color of panic. Your arm." Her voice cracked, filled with horror. Eli winced, trying to laugh. "Yeah, I think it's medium rare now. But the pain was too much." His vision swam and he could barely keep his balance. Laura caught him before he fell, her hands shaking as she pressed against the wound. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" He managed a weak smile. "You were closer to the blast." "I just reacted." Her crest flickered between blue and violet, emotions she didn't have words for. "You risked yourself. For me?" He nodded faintly. "That's what friends do, right?" Her grip tightened on his sleeve. "Among my kind, that is not friendship. That is madness." He chuckled weakly. "Then I guess humans are a little mad." The med-droids arrived within minutes, lifting him onto a stretcher. Laura followed, refusing to leave his side. The whole way to the infirmary, she stayed silent, her expression unreadable, but her crest never stopped glowing. Hours later, Eli woke up in the med bay. His arm was wrapped in a shimmering band of healing gel. The pain dulled to a distant throb. He turned his head and saw her there, sitting beside his bed, motionless, eyes fixed on him. "Hey," he said softly, trying to smile. "You didn't have to babysit me." She didn't answer right away. Then in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "On Othrail, we do not touch others without purpose. We do not stay near those who hurt. But when I saw you fall," her voice trembled, "I felt something I have no word for." Eli watched her, realizing how shaken she really was. For the first time since they met, her calm mask had cracked. "Maybe that's fear," he said gently. "Or maybe it's care." Her crest shimmered faintly violet, confusion mixed with emotion. "Your heart. It makes no sense," she murmured. "It drives you to pain and still calls it good." Eli smiled. "Yeah, that's kind of what being human means." She looked at him for a long time, and for once she didn't try to understand, she just felt. Before leaving, she reached out hesitantly, her cool fingers brushing his hand. "You are strange," she said softly. "Soft, foolish, and yet, I am grateful you are here." He smiled tiredly. "Wouldn't miss it for the universe." As she walked out, the medbay lights caught the edge of her crest, painting it in warm gold, the Othralian color of deep emotion. And for the first time in her life, Laura understood what her instructors never taught her. Strength wasn't always silence. Sometimes it was the sound of a human heartbeat that refused to stop. Days passed after the accident, but the memory of that moment stayed in both their hearts. Eli's arm healed quickly, thanks to the advanced med gel, but Laura's thoughts did not heal as fast. Something inside her had shifted that day, something she couldn't explain or ignore. She had grown up believing emotions were weakness, that caring too much was dangerous. Yet she had seen a human throw himself into fire without hesitation, just to save someone else. No logic, no gain, only instinct and heart. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him pushing her away from the blast, saw his arm burn and heard his voice whisper, "That's what friends do." The words echoed inside her like a song she couldn't stop hearing. Eli, meanwhile, was back to his usual self, laughing, joking, and pretending everything was fine. But Laura could see through it now. She noticed the way his smile faltered when he thought no one was watching. She noticed the stiffness in his movements when he lifted something heavy. One evening, she found him sitting by the window, his bandaged arm resting on his lap, the stars reflecting in his tired eyes. Without a word, she sat beside him. "You should rest," she said softly. "Your body still recovers," he smiled. "I'll be fine. I've had worse. You know humans, we're stubborn." Her crest flickered faintly. "You keep saying that word, stubborn. I think it means foolish." He laughed. "Sometimes, yeah, but sometimes it means not giving up." She looked at him closely, her voice almost a whisper. "Why didn't you let me take the risk that day? I am stronger, faster. I could survive better than you." Eli shrugged gently. "Maybe, but it wasn't about strength. It was about choice. I didn't think. I just acted. You were in danger, that was enough." Her eyes softened. "Among my kind, such behavior would be punished. They would call it emotional recklessness." "Then I guess humans are reckless," he said with a grin. "We act from the heart." Laura tilted her head slightly. "The heart. You speak of it often. But it is only a muscle, yes? It moves blood." Eli chuckled quietly. "Maybe on a chart, yeah. But to humans, it's more than that. It's where love, courage, and kindness live. Even when the mind says no, the heart says yes." She was silent for a long moment, her crest slowly shifting to soft gold. "Your heart is a strange thing, Eli," she said softly. "It gives even when it has nothing left." The next morning, Eli woke to find something on his desk. It was a small note written in Laura's delicate handwriting. "Humans are strange. They risk, they feel, they forgive. But maybe their madness is not weakness. Maybe it is what keeps the stars bright." He smiled, reading it, warmth filling his chest. She was learning, not just about humans, but about herself. That evening, she knocked on his door, properly this time, and stepped inside. She looked nervous, her crest flickering pale pink. "I have a request," she said, standing by his bed. "Sure," he replied. "What's up?" "I wish to understand the human heart," she said slowly. "You speak of it as if it is more than flesh. I want to feel what you mean." Eli blinked in surprise, unsure what she meant. "Feel it? How?" She hesitated, then stepped closer and placed her slender hand gently over his chest. Her skin was cool against his shirt. "Here," she whispered. "I wish to sense it." Eli stayed still. The silence between them was deep, filled only by the soft, steady sound of his heartbeat. Laura's eyes widened. "It moves," she whispered. "It does not stop. Even when you rest, that's right," he said quietly. "It keeps going, always." Her fingers trembled slightly. "So this is what drives you," she said. "This small thing of flesh and sound," he smiled. "Yeah, it's not big, but it's strong." For a long moment, she didn't move her hand. Her crest glowed faint gold and her eyes seemed brighter, softer. "On my world," she said finally, "hearts slow when the body sleeps. They rest. They stop for moments of stillness." "And yours?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her voice trembling. "Mine has not stopped since I met you." Eli looked at her in quiet surprise. She stepped back, almost shy. "Perhaps your madness is beautiful." That night, when Eli finally fell asleep, he dreamed of stars beating like hearts, endless, alive and full of light, and somewhere, in the quiet dark of the dorm room, Laura sat awake, her hand pressed to her own chest, feeling a rhythm that had never been there before. For the first time in her life, she didn't fear the noise inside her. It was the sound of something new, something human, learning to live. The days that followed were quiet, peaceful, almost too peaceful. Laura had returned to her studies, focusing on her interspecies psychology project. Yet something inside her had changed since that night she felt Eli's heartbeat. She told herself it was only curiosity, only research, only science. But her hands trembled every time she remembered the warmth of his chest under her palm, that steady, endless rhythm. The heart that never stopped. Eli, on the other hand, noticed her distance. She was polite as always, precise, efficient, but softer somehow. She no longer barked commands or corrected his grammar. She started asking why humans smiled when they were sad, or how it felt to miss someone. At first, Eli thought she was just being a good student. But there was something else in her eyes when she asked, something searching. One evening, he found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by data pads and old books about human behavior. Her crest flickered between blue and violet, confusion and curiosity. Working hard, he teased, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up, startled. "You are early," she said, blinking. "I was studying," he chuckled. "Yeah, I can see that. Studying emotions, huh?" "Yes," she said seriously. "I still cannot understand why humans feel joy and sorrow at the same time. You laugh when you cry. You smile when you hurt. It makes no sense." Eli sat down beside her. "Maybe it doesn't have to make sense. Sometimes feelings just are." She frowned slightly. "That is not scientific," he grinned. "Neither is love." Her crest froze, color draining to pale silver. "Love?" she repeated slowly. "You mean the emotional attachment between beings?" "That's the one," he said. "The strongest thing humans know." Laura lowered her gaze to the floor. "On my world, we do not have that. We bond once a year, for reproduction. There is no attachment." "That sounds lonely," Eli said softly. She looked up, confused. "Lonely?" "Yeah," he said. "It means being surrounded by silence even when people are around, like you're missing something." Laura didn't reply. For a long moment, she just stared at him, really stared, as if seeing him for the first time. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. Her room was dark except for the faint glow of the moons outside. She sat on her bed, her hand resting lightly over her chest. There it was again. That strange, steady rhythm she had felt since that night. It beat faster whenever she thought of Eli's smile, his laugh, his kindness. She pressed harder, whispering to herself, "What are you doing to me?" But her heart, and her human heart as she called it now, gave no answer. The next day, Eli found her sitting alone in the courtyard, watching the morning sun rise over the academy towers. He brought 2 mugs of steaming cocoa. "You looked like you could use one," he said, handing her a cup. She blinked at it. "It smells sweet. Taste it," he said. "You'll like it." She hesitated, then took a cautious sip. Her eyes widened instantly. "It is warm," he laughed. "That's the point. Makes you feel good, doesn't it?" Laura looked down at the cup in her hands, then at him. "It does. Strange. A liquid should not make one happy." "It's not the drink," he said softly. "It's the moment." For a while they just sat together, watching the sunrise paint the sky gold. The silence between them was not empty anymore. It was gentle. Later, when Eli left for his shift, Laura remained sitting there, the cup still warm in her hands. She opened her data log and began recording. Observation: human emotion is not weakness. It connects, protects, and gives strength. I begin to suspect that emotion is not just in the heart. It becomes part of the soul. She stopped typing, staring at the screen. Her chest tightened. The thought of Eli getting hurt again, even slightly, filled her with a strange ache she had no name for. "Perhaps," she whispered, "I am no longer observing. Perhaps I am becoming." That night she found herself standing at his door. Her fingers hovered over the control panel, trembling. He opened the door before she could knock. "Hey, Laura, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her golden eyes bright with something soft, unguarded. "I do not know what this feeling is," she said honestly. "But when you are hurt, I cannot breathe. When you smile, it warms me. And when you are far, it feels empty here." She touched her chest gently. Eli's voice softened. "That sounds a lot like love." She blinked, almost afraid. "Then love hurts?" He smiled gently. "Sometimes. But it's worth it. Laura's crest glowed warm gold, the color of understanding. Then maybe, I do not wish to stop hurting. And for the first time she smiled, truly smiled, a soft, human smile. Eli saw it and felt something shift in his own heart too. Neither of them said a word. They didn't have to, because in that moment under the quiet hum of the station lights, two hearts, one human, one alien, began to beat in the same rhythm. The calm days didn't last long. Laura's sudden change and her emotions, her closeness to Eli, had not gone unnoticed. One morning, two officers from her planet's delegation arrived at the academy. Their expressions were cold and official, their tones sharp like steel. "Cadet Laura of the Aryan Order," one said. "You are to report for review. Your conduct has shown deviation." Laura stood tall, though her voice trembled. "Deviation? You have displayed emotional compromise," the officer continued. "You have formed a bond with a human. You have forgotten restraint." Eli, standing beside her, clenched his fists. "Hey, she's done nothing wrong." The officer didn't even look at him. This matter concerns Aryan discipline, not human sentiment. Laura wanted to argue, wanted to say that what she had learned from Eli wasn't weakness, but strength. Yet fear wrapped around her throat. On her world, emotions could end a career, even exile someone. She looked at Eli once, her eyes full of silent apology. Then she turned and followed the officers out. The following days were the hardest Eli had ever known. Her room was empty. Her things were gone. The station halls felt colder. He went to the command office to ask questions, but all they told him was, "The Aryan cadet has been recalled for evaluation." He didn't sleep that night. He kept thinking of her last words. "Maybe I do not wish to stop hurting." He realized then that she hadn't just learned about love. She had felt it, and now they were trying to take it from her. Laura sat in a bright, sterile room on her home ship. The walls pulsed with soft blue light, emotion-suppressing fields. Her crest, once bright and alive, now flickered dull silver. "Explain your behavior," the senior examiner demanded. "Why did you act with attachment toward the human male?" Laura lowered her head. "Because he taught me something we never understood." "And what is that?" She looked up, voice shaking but steady. "That caring for someone is not weakness. It gives you strength. It makes you alive." The examiner's crest turned red. Anger. "You let yourself be infected with primitive emotion. You shame your kind." Laura took a deep breath. "Then maybe we need a little shame." Meanwhile, Eli wasn't ready to give up. He searched every channel, every comms unit, until he found a maintenance officer who told him the Aryan ship was leaving orbit within the hour. Without thinking, Eli ran. He didn't have clearance or permission, only one thing in his chest pushing him forward, his heart. By the time he reached the dock, security drones were already locking down the launch zone. The ship engines glowed like twin suns. He yelled into the comms. "Laura, if you can hear me, please." Inside the ship, Laura froze. The sound of his voice cut through every wall, every field meant to keep emotions away. She ran to the viewport, and there he was, small, human, desperate, standing in the cold docking bay with his arm raised toward her. Her heart. That's strange. Unstoppable heart began to beat faster. "Laura, you said once that my heart never stops," Eli shouted through the intercom. "Well, it's true. Because it beats for you now." Her crest flared gold. She turned to the examiner. "I cannot stay here. Sit down, cadet." He barked, but she didn't. For the first time in her life, she defied everything she was taught. She pressed the emergency door release, sprinted down the corridor, and jumped onto the docking bridge before it retracted. The gravity field hit her hard, but Eli caught her, just in time. They both stumbled, breathless. Eyes wide. "You came back," he whispered. "I never left," she said softly. Later, the station commander lectured them both for hours. There were reports, warnings, and endless talks about regulations. But none of it mattered. Because when the stars rose again outside their dorm window, they sat side by side, quiet and peaceful. Laura rested her head against his shoulder. "I do not know what will happen now," she said. "My people may never accept this." Eli smiled faintly. "Maybe they don't have to. Maybe one heart is enough to start a change." She looked at him with that same soft gold glow. "You believe that?" "I do," he said. "Because that's what humans do. We keep believing even when it hurts." She placed her hand on his chest again, feeling the steady rhythm under her palm. "Still beating," she whispered. "Always," he replied. "It never stops." Outside the window, the stars shimmered like countless tiny hearts pulsing in the dark sky. For the first time, Laura didn't see them as cold lights in space. She saw them as living things, proof that warmth could exist even in the emptiest void. She smiled quietly. "Your heart is strong, Eli." He looked at her and shook his head gently. "Ours," he said. "It's our heart now." And somewhere deep inside her chest, her own heart answered, steady, fearless, and finally free. It didn't matter what her species thought anymore. Because love, she realized, was not bound by stars or skin or blood. It simply was. It was the heartbeat that never stopped.